I am still buzzing from that Spurs Thunder game. My guest and I are going to break down this Knicks-Cavs series in a second. There's a ton of fascinating matchup and strategy things that we're going to talk about. Remember, RealGM Radio with Wes Goldberg is part of the RealGM Radio network. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out on YouTube. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers on our new relaunched YouTube channel, and the support is really appreciated. Also, make sure to tune into the Double Dribble with Mo Dakhil and Jared Dubin tomorrow for their reaction tonight to tonight's Knicks-Cavs game. But let's jump into this Spurs win over the Thunder to kick off the Western Conference Finals. There's a lot that we could talk about in this game. We are going to talk a lot about San Antonio's defense. We're going to talk about some of the adjustments that we started to see from OKC towards the end of Game 1 and more of what I would expect to see them do in Game 2. But I got to start here. And I'm watching this game and the post-game reaction and the way that Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs handled themselves. And I can't help but think, Victor Wembanyama is a lot of things on the court. And we could praise all the things that he's doing. First overall pick, 7'5", unbelievable two-way player, the skills that he has offensively, the way that he could dominate every single possession defensively. But what I came away, like, we knew all that stuff, and I was impressed with all that stuff, and I'm going to get into all that stuff. But the main feeling I had coming out of that game was Wembanyama is making it cool to be competitive again. After the game, he admitted that he took Shai Gilgeous-Alexander winning MVP personally, and that was officially announced on Monday night as Shai won the MVP award. This was an award, remember, that Victor Wembanyama was actively campaigning for during the regular season. I call it the Chalamet effect, right? Where it's like, hey, let me speak it into existence. These are the things that I want to accomplish. And I'm not going to be afraid of admitting that. I'm going to go out and say, hey, I want these things. I want to be great. And you're seeing Wemby do that. And we've seen him do this now for months. But to get to this stage, the Western Conference Finals, against the defending champs, and say, I took it personally when the reigning MVP of the regular season last year, the reigning finals MVP for the best player on the best team, I took it personally that he won MVP and I didn't. I find that fascinating. And more important than fascinating, I find it really cool. Wemby's making it cool to be competitive again, because there's a whole generation of NBA players who kind of acted too cool for school, if we're being honest. And they accomplished a lot of things. I'm talking about LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. Sort of the faces of the league who really pushed player empowerment forward. And that's an important thing for the league, and I get it. And their influence is obviously felt and has been beneficial to the players in a lot of different kinds of ways. And has obviously influenced the way that we cover the league. But what was missing from our star players, I think, was a cool factor. Just hey, I'm a competitive MFer, and all of this stuff, all of the money that we're making, all of the empowerment and the entitlements that we get as NBA stars, all of that's great. But at the end of the day, I want to kick your ass. And we've seen a lot of guys, again, too cool for school, and obviously, and honestly, healthy, like mentally well, right? Like I don't even mean this as a critique, but you see guys like Tim Duncan and LeBron James and Kevin Durant fail in the biggest moments and say, you know what? I'm going to live another day. I'm going to use this. I'm going to get better. It's not that big deal. It's not that big of a deal. I can feel good about the way I approach the game, and sometimes the ball doesn't always go in, and it doesn't always bounce your way. And that was, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, it feels like that has been the overwhelming kind of response to failure of, like, Giannis the other day, not the other day, the other season after is the season of disappointment? No, and kind of does this long monologue about how, about failure. And it's like, all right, boring, mentally well, good for you, but boring, obviously, and incredibly boring. Victor Wembanyama is not boring because obviously he's thrilling on the court, but it's also his approach. He's making it okay to be competitive again. He's making it cool to be competitive again. And I think the biggest part of this is, if I were to psychoanalyze here for a second, the reason why you have a whole generation speaking about failure and not taking things as personal, oh, it's just another game. The reason why you have an entire generation talking about basketball like that is because you don't want to go out on that limb. Because once you go out on that limb, then you raise the stakes and you risk embarrassment. And embarrassment is bad for your brand. It's bad for your money-making potential. And honestly, it doesn't, like, talking to the media about this stuff doesn't really do anything for you. Like, what's the difference? I'm going to win or I'm going to lose either way. What difference does it make if I give you the quote or not? But Wemby's not thinking about it like that. He's making it cool to be competitive again. And maybe more importantly for him and his team, that competitiveness, that open, unapologetic, I want to kick your butt. I'm competitive. I took it personal that you won MVP and I didn't. I'm better than this guy. At least he believes he is. And by the way, he was in game one, far and away the best player on that court. That trickles down to the rest of the roster. Teams take on the identity of their best player more often than not. And for better or for worse. And in the case of Victor Wembanyama, it's clearly for the better. Because what I saw in game one was a team with Victor Wembanyama, who's 22 years old, whatever he is, Dylan Harper, a rookie, Stephon Castle, in his second year, never even sniffing a situation like this in his basketball life, even in college. This is just different. By the way, a rookie head coach in Mitch Johnson, who's also competitive as hell. And your most veteran players are your backup and a guy who's basically out of the rotation now in Harrison Barnes. And the other guy, De'Aaron Fox, is out with an ankle injury. And I saw that team walk into the house of the defending champs and say, not only can we beat these guys, we should beat these guys. And we're going to tell you that we should beat these guys because we're taking it personally. And we're taking it personally because our best player is taking it personally, our leader. So Wembanyama asked about whether or not he took that night personally. Said, yeah, for sure. Does not shy away from it. That's what he told reporters. He embraces the competition and the rest of his team follows his lead. So not only is that really interesting and cool for us just consuming and watching that game, and again, I am still buzzing from that game. What a game. And we're going to break it down here in a second. But the fact that he approached it that way and that the rest of his team followed him, I think is as big of a reason why the Spurs won that game as some of the strategy stuff and strategic, like all this stuff that we're about to talk about. That self-belief from a team that young, you do not see that. That is a special thing, and it comes from Wembanyama. The fact that he is making it cool to be competitive again, and he is leading his team with that competitiveness. That's the reason why the Spurs feel so together as a group. They're all in it together. There is no too cool for school. There isn't this idea of, hey, if we lose, as the team's best player, I'm still going to be making a ton of money, and I'm going to be okay. And that was sort of the overwhelming sentiment from a lot of the superstar players in the past. Again, good for you. Good mental health. Not interesting to me. Not even a little. Boring. A lot of our superstars are boring. And the league has been talking about why is the face of the league, LeBron and Steph, who are just these super polarizing figures for a lot of different kind of reasons, when they leave, who's going to be the face of the league? It's this guy. And Anthony Edwards probably also. He's also sort of embracing this. Now, the Timberwolves have some work to do. But it's really going to be this guy. Because he's interesting. Because he's willing to live with stakes. He's willing to put himself out there as a super competitor and not shy away from that. And he's not going to say, hey, no matter what, I'm going to be okay. Because he will. No matter what, he's going to be fine. He'll be a millionaire, generational wealth, all that stuff. He'll be okay. But he wants to win. And that's what fans care about. Fans don't care about player empowerment. Fans don't care about how much money these players make. They don't care. They want their best player to act like they care about the basketball game. They want their best player to live with the stakes like they do. And Wemby does that. And the rest of his team follows his lead. And by the way, the only way this works is if he delivers. And boy, does Victor Wembanyama deliver. 41 points, 24 rebounds on 56% shooting. Play after play of just mind-boggling. I mean, we could do the whole list of mind-boggling things that Wemby did in that game. He had an alley-oop with one hand that I had to rewatch. I'm like, did he only catch that? Did he put that in with one hand? Yep. Chet Holmgren was grabbing and holding the other one. So he's like, I don't care. I'm just going to put this in. By the way, Wemby doesn't complain a ton. Just going to go ahead and put that in. Lob after lob of like not even jumping because the guy's enormous. Just stuff that I'm like, what am I even watching right now? And then the creme de la creme of the highlights from Victor Wembanyama, the 28-footer at the end of the first overtime to tie the game and send it into a second overtime. It reminded me, so the play was less than a minute left in overtime, first overtime period. Wembanyama brings it up, kicks it up to Stephon Castle. Stephon Castle brings it past half court, up the left side, flips it back to Victor Wembanyama just to get into their offense. And Victor Wembanyama's like, the hell with our offense. I'm going to shoot it from right here. And right here was basically the logo in Oklahoma City. 28 feet away. Splash. Ties the game. The balls to take that shot, man. Because if that doesn't go in, that's the dumbest shot of the playoffs. Right? But it goes in. It goes in. That 7'5" guy hit a 30-footer to tie the game in his first appearance in the Western Conference Finals against the defending champs to save game one. Because if the Spurs lose this game, this is going to be... that is almost... I don't think it's as big of a deal for the Thunder to lose this game as it would have been for the Spurs to lose this game. Because the Spurs, you go in Oklahoma City, you have a chance to steal one, you got to get it. You cannot waste these opportunities against this Thunder team. The Thunder almost got this one. But Wemby hits the shot of the game. And I was immediately kind of transported back to when I was first watching Steph Curry and just like the audacity of some of the shots that he was taking. And now those shots from guards have become commonplace. But from guys who are 7 feet tall, this is still not commonplace. This is far from commonplace. So when Wemby started to go into a shot, I'm like, he is not, and then he was. And by the way, you look at all of his teammates, and they're looking around like, did he just shoot that? And the Thunder are just like, look at Alex Caruso on that play. He's like, what the hell? This guy moves the goalpost back himself and then goes right by him. Over and over and over again. It's unbelievable what this guy is doing. Unbelievable. Defensively, obviously, huge impact in this one. The Spurs basically played a base defense it was essentially sort of this hybrid zone scheme where Wemby was going to be playing off of a guy, sort of this ghost coverage type of scheme where they had him slotted on, Isaiah Hartenstein to start the game, and then he kind of would go to Caruso and some other guys as we got into the rotations. But basically always dropping back into the paint by the rim and making sure that he was either always help side at the very least, or, if the action was running his way, that he was involved in a double. And that's essentially what he was going to be doing. And it worked, right? I mean, nothing new here. This is why the Spurs were so successful against the Thunder all regular season long, is the Thunder subsist on paint touches. That is their entire offense. They're not a great three-point shooting team. They need to get into the paint, and that's where they're obviously most effective. Not tonight. They were 16 of 28 at the rim, 57% for the game at the rim. That's terrible. 21% field goal percentage on short paint jumpers, short mid-range attempts. Terrible. That is their bread and butter. That's where they're elite, and they were horrible. They were horrible from that, and that was Wemby. That was all Wemby, who, by the way, played a career-high almost 49 minutes, 48 minutes, 42 seconds in this game. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 7 of 23 overall, 24 points. Yes, did get to the line. Most of that work was done later in the game, and I do think that the Thunder found a couple of things that they can work with in Game 2 that I'll talk about here in a second, but Shai overall was just not good, and in the first three quarters, really couldn't get anything going. A lot of high pickups for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to either get the ball out of his hands or deny him the ball. They trapped basically, or showed bodies at the very least, off of every ball screen that Shai ran off of. His primary defender for basically most of the night was Stephon Castle or Carter Bryant. And I thought it was really smart of Mitch Johnson to toggle those guys, make sure that one of those guys was always in the game to defend Shai. And what the Spurs have concluded is that we need to put length on Shai. Long, athletic perimeter defenders. That's what's going to work for us on Shai. We're not going to necessarily try to keep him out of the paint or off of his spots necessarily, but when he does get there, make those shots really difficult. Make him have to shoot over or around these guys. And I think my favorite defensive possession from Stephon Castle, who held Shai to 2 of 7 shooting in this game, Carter Bryant 0 for 1. SGA was 0 for 1 against Carter Bryant. That meant that in the time that Carter Bryant was defending him, Shai got off 1 shot. Carter Bryant was awesome in this game defensively. But I think my favorite defensive possession involved on Shai was early in the first quarter. Stephon Castle's on him. He goes over the screen, the Hartenstein screen. He's attached to Shai's hip. And then Shai, this is, again, I think this might have been Shai's first field goal attempt even, goes into that pump fake that we've seen him go to a million times. And when players will either bite on the pump fake and foul him, or they don't bite on it right away, Shai gets into it and then gets into the leaner, gets the shot off. It'll either go in and it gets the and one, because on that lean, he'll lean into the body of the defender and draw the foul, or stumble and kind of create, the mirage of contact that way. Or teams will just or you'll see a guy just bring his hands down and just send him to the free throw line for two shots. That didn't happen. Castle goes over the screen, attaches to the hip, doesn't bite at the first pump fake, and then a simple contest on that leaner. Just puts his hands up, stays vertical, doesn't leave his feet. And SGA, clearly uncomfortable, shoots this like off-balance leaner that you could tell he's used to getting the call on, doesn't get the call, and misses high off the glass. And right away, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Of course, we've seen this in the regular season, but you want to see it, obviously, in the Western Conference Finals. And that was kind of Shai's night for most of the night. Now, OKC did have some adjustments as this game went on. I think, for the most part, they tried to just get to their bread and butter, which honestly I was kind of okay with. Maybe you make an adjustment a little bit earlier, but it's the first game. You really want to push this and see, okay, can we just do these things better? If we screen a little bit better, can we get Shai free? Does Shai need to find a rhythm after we were off for so long? Like, I get not making dramatic changes right away. And like I said, the Thunder could have won this game if not for a couple of different bounces. But eventually in the fourth quarter, they took away the ball screens and they just started having Shai go isolation. And they said, okay, we're going to flatten out our offense. We're not going to bring up another guy so that now the Spurs can't bring 2 to the ball and show SGA bodies and make him go wide, keep him from going downhill and getting to his spots. So they just said, we're going to isolate whoever's on him. Just we're going to let Shai cook. And that actually started to get him into rhythm a little bit here. And then what I thought was really interesting was it felt like for most of the game, they were trying to move their actions away from Victor Wembanyama. Basically, whichever side of the floor Wemby was on, they would go the other way. And I thought in the fourth quarter, they stopped doing that. And I think the turning point in the fourth quarter was they're still trying to go away from Wemby. Wemby comes in as the help defender, doubles Shai, and then he actually blocks a step back long 2 from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at the end of the shot clock. Very next Thunder possession, they come down. SGA clears out to one side. He's got Devin Vassell on him. Wemby comes over for that help defense. So now you got Shai doubled. Instead of going away from those guys, he goes right into them. Isolates both of them. Gets by both of them. Goes off the glass with his left hand. Draws the foul on Wemby as they both tumble to the ground. And I think that made something click there. At that point, you started seeing Shai just go at Victor Wembanyama straight on. Because I think the Thunder realized, Mark Daigneault and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and I think correctly realized, look, when Wemby's on the court, he's on the court, and he's going to impact every possession no matter what. So there is no version of our offense where Wemby is not impacting that possession. So we're going to start there. The floor of every single one of our possessions has Wemby involved in it. So now that we know that we can't avoid Wemby, we have a decision to make. Do we try to go around Wemby and make him a help side defender? Or do we just go straight at him where instead of having Wemby plus, it's just Wemby? And while there's no good decisions here, we'd rather have just Wemby than Wemby plus. Wemby as the help side defender in a double team versus Wemby by himself. Wemby's involved either way. So we might as well just go against Wemby than two and three guys at a time. And I think that's what you saw now. All of a sudden, Shai's just getting Victor Wembanyama in isolation. They're just running straight pick and roll, getting Wemby on the switch and going to work. And I actually thought that worked. I thought that worked for Shai. It just created a little bit more space, right? Not a ton. It wasn't MVP level Shai, but it was definitely better than what Shai was in the first three quarters. So we saw that. Another thing that we saw was the Thunder using Shai off the ball to start those actions, especially when they went smaller to end this game with Chet at the 5. They brought in, I think the lineup was Shai, AJ Mitchell, Alex Caruso, Jalen Williams, and Chet. So they go to that lineup, which I think is going to be their go-to lineup at the end of these games. When they went there, because they have different ball handlers, whether it was Jalen Williams, who did a lot more ball handling at the end of this game, or AJ Mitchell, who obviously does his fair share of ball handling. When they went to those guys, one of those guys would initiate the offense, and they would have Shai start in the corner and come up for some different action. I know they ran an Iverson cut that the broadcast highlighted at some point in overtime. I think that they could do some other things here if we're talking about adjustments. Maybe run some Chicago action to just get him off of a pin down and then a dribble handoff, so that creates a little bit more space for him. Make Victor Wembanyama have to run through screens if he's going to switch that. And I think that's probably another thing that they can do is getting Wemby to move side to side a little bit more higher up on the floor. Wemby has no problem moving side to side, but he wants to do it on the baseline. But if you can get him to move side to side high up on the floor where he has to start navigating some of those screens, that's where you really start to create some space. And then I thought, you got to be more decisive. If you create that space and you get downhill, you got to get straight to that layup. You got to hit the gas and you got to get to that layup. Even if it's not off the right foot, even if it's out of the wrong hand, you just got to get that thing up there. Because if you wait a split second, Wemby's going to catch you. And I think that's the other thing that they could do. And I think Wembanyama, by the way, is going to have this effect on teams for the rest of his career, especially in playoff series, where that first game, you're like, oh yeah, the rhythm is just a little bit different. We have half a second less to get this shot off than we usually do. And I think you're going to see the Spurs during the Victor Wembanyama era have a really good record in game ones of playoff series, because teams are going to have to take a whole game to get used to sort of the new cadence and the rhythm of what they have to do offensively when Wemby's on the court on defense. And I think that's what we're going to see from the Thunder. I think they're going to be a lot more decisive in game 2. They're going to be quicker to get these shots off, hitting the gas earlier in these possessions, not being quite as methodical and not being quite as choosy, right? Like I said, if you can get this shot off now, get it off and trust your touch. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot more of in game 2. Plus, I think also what we saw from SGA at the end of this game, where they're getting into isolation on Wemby more, trying to turn him into the on-ball defender as opposed to the help defender more often. Again, no great choices, but that's the best of the bad choices. And then running Shai off some off-ball screens and going and toggling into those smaller lineups a little bit more often with one true big on the floor. I didn't think it was a good Hartenstein game really at all. He was kind of I know that he was a positive in the plus-minus, but played 12 minutes, was basically a non-factor out there. Did nothing on the boards, by the way. The Thunder are going to have to win the rebounding battle. 61-40, they got out-rebounded in this game. That's not going to be good enough. The three-point variance is going to be something to watch in this series, but another thing I kind of love about this series is I don't think it matters. The Thunder shot 38%. The Spurs shot 30%. The Spurs still won the game. This ain't the Eastern Conference, where it just feels like every one of those games comes down to who wins the three-point battle. That's not the case in this series. Not necessarily. So I think that was another big one. Alex Caruso, just amazing game, 31 points off the bench. Two-way masterpiece. If the Thunder win this game, he's the story. I also don't know how many more Caruso games like this we're going to get in this series. My guess would be 0. 0 times he scores 30 points again. I mean, 8 of 14 from three-point range. He was Oklahoma City's three-point shooting in this one. Jalen Williams, it was good to see him get going. 26 points on 25 shots, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. Again, got stronger as the game went on. I thought Chet, who was kind of getting punked in the first 3 quarters, also started to pick up some steam in the fourth quarter and overtime, had his best defensive possessions later in this game. So I do think the Thunder got stronger as the game went on, as they found more of their rhythm and they kind of figured out this whole Spurs rhythm. Because look, I mean, Portland, the Lakers, as banged up and injured as they were, they just haven't faced adversity yet in these playoffs. This is adversity. This is real friction, right? And so for them to need a minute to adjust, I think is real. But the fact that I can also say this about the Spurs, who also didn't deal with a ton. Now, Minnesota was obviously more physical and a little bit more of a challenge than anything the Thunder had to deal with. But the Spurs came in here with a real advantage, despite the fact that they were playing the defending champs on their home floor. And look, I don't know necessarily that Victor Wembanyama is already the best player in the league. He might be. And if you want to make that case, I cannot sit here and argue strongly against that. I just personally take a little bit longer to get there. I want to see some accomplishments. I want to see some stuff on the resume before I hand over the crown. To me, SGA, Jokic, these guys are still the best two players in the league. But Wemby's right there. And like I said, if you want to make the argument that he's the best player in the league, I'm not going to argue strongly against you. I might in my heart of hearts be there. I'm just not ready maybe to admit it. But even if Wemby isn't the best player in the NBA, he is clearly the most unsolvable. And in a playoff series, that actually might matter more. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, XJ, the co-host of Locked On Knicks and the host of the Hot Hand Theory podcast, does a great job breaking down the strategy of the game. He's going to join me to talk Knicks-Cavs. We're going to be right back. All right, I'm here with XJ, co-host of Locked On Knicks, the host of the Hot Hand Theory podcast. Really excited for today's episode, number one, because I'm very excited to talk with you. First time you're jumping here on RealGM Radio, but also because this series is going to be, I think, a lot of fun. Knicks-Cavs, Eastern Conference Finals. We're going to break it all down from all angles here. Let's start, XJ, with what it's going to look like when the Knicks are on offense. And to me, if I'm the Knicks, the number one thing I'm trying to accomplish here is every possession down, I want to put their big men into rotation, make them make decisions. Because for the Knicks, I know that my greatest strength is my half-court offense. If I'm going to win this series, it's going to be me leaning into that strength. And the best way for me to disrupt Cleveland's defense in the half-court is to make their bigs make tough decisions and get them to make mistakes. So there's a number of things we could talk about, other players that we can attack on the perimeter and things like that. But the number one thing, if I'm the Knicks, that I'm trying to do is Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, I want you to come up away from the basket, and I want to make you make decisions, make mistakes, get you into rotation. And I think if I do that, I at least start dictating the terms of engagement a little bit. But what about you? What do you think?
I mean, I'm pretty close to where you are. That's the dream, right? Getting those bigs away from the basket. That's how the Knicks have thrived in this postseason so far and really just utterly dominated their two previous opponents. They're taking about 40% of their shots at the rim in this postseason, which is completely absurd. That is way up from what it was in the regular season for them. They're basically living at the basket, but you can't do that if there's a rim protector just sitting camped out waiting there. So to your point, I definitely think you want to get those bigs up into the action. The nice thing about the Cavs defensively, from a Knicks standpoint, is you sort of can predict what defense they're going to play by which big you bring into the action. Like Jarrett Allen's typically going to play drop. Evan Mobley's going to typically be up at the level of the screen or switch sometimes if he can't, if they just end up stuck in that situation. That being said, I think the biggest thing from Knicks land that I'm looking at from an offensive standpoint is really about how the Cavs choose to guard the Knicks. And there's something that we talk about endlessly on Locked On Knicks, which is something we call ghost coverage. And it's essentially what we saw the Cavs just do against the Pistons and Asar Thompson, have Evan Mobley guard the weakest shooter on the opposing side, especially if it's a wing, have him kind of roam around the paint and stay near the paint to protect and bring help against paint penetration from the opponents. And I would expect the Cavs to play very similarly against Josh Hart. And it sounds kind of crazy looking at some of the shooting percentages. We look at Josh Hart, he's shooting about 41% from three this season, which is incredible, having one of his best shooting seasons of his career. That being said, he is reluctant. He is a tentative shooter. He is a hesitant shooter if he doesn't have the right feel. And so if he's going to pass up on some of those open corner threes that he might get as a result of Evan Mobley playing in this way, that is the Cavs' best way to shut down the Knicks offense. And in my opinion, and I could be a little biased here watching every single Knicks game, but I think if you don't guard the Knicks this way, there is no way to stop their offense. Their offense is too good. Karl-Anthony Towns, now that they've activated him, playing as the playmaker hub on the perimeter and pulling that rim protector away from the rim, having all of the Knicks' great cutters diving to the basket with some, nice off-ball actions. There's not really a way to slow down this offense unless you do have somebody camped out in the paint. And so I think that's what we'll see the Cavs start to do and what the Knicks will try to attack.
I couldn't agree more. The matchups I think are going to be we're going to know, right, as soon as this game's tipped off, like, oh, okay, this is how Cleveland at least plans to do this for now, and things can obviously change over the course of that series. But the Josh Hart point, like, if they do put a big on Hart and do the ghost coverage thing, as the way you put it, we know what Josh Hart can do, right? As a cutter, as a rebounder, I think he's going to be huge in this series. And then obviously we know what the Knicks can do as a counter is start having Josh Hart set those screens, and then you can obviously punish defenses that way. I'm really interested, just point blank, like which big guards Cat first. When Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley are in that starting lineup, my guess is going to be Mobley. That way, because you could just easily switch the Brunson actions, and then you're going to have Jarrett Allen either playing off of Josh Hart. I wonder if the Knicks might actually experiment with having Jarrett Allen guard OG Anunoby coming off that injury and just say, you know what? We kind of want to live with this, and this way we can kind of hide Harden on Josh Hart. That's going to be interesting to me too.
I think that's an incredible point, something that not a lot of people are talking about over on my end of Knicks land, and I think is something that's totally viable. I agree with you. It makes a lot of sense to put Mobley on Cat, switch those Brunson Towns actions, which are the most devastating actions the Knicks can go to when they have space around them. But I do imagine Jarrett Allen totally being viable to end up on OG instead of Hart to start the series for the points you described. The only issue is I just think OG is going to shoot it every time. OG, we know, has had incredible confidence in this postseason, has made some ridiculous shots, honestly, and anytime he's open, he's pulling the trigger. He does not have this hesitancy, tentative problem that Josh Hart tends to have, so I imagine OG can shoot them out of that. But I can imagine them starting with that kind of early on and just testing OG's health and seeing how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, like to your point, there's not a great way for Cleveland to. Either way, they're going to either have to test Jarrett Allen to guard in an uncomfortable way, even if Allen's on Cat, like that's a little uncomfortable for him having to get up high and play those actions between him and Brunson. Or you're going to put him on Anunoby, and you're going to be like, all right, well, that's not awesome. And I kind of think the Knicks would be like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like let's spam this for a little while. These corner things. Also, Cat is really good at hitting that diagonal pass to the corner and finding specifically OG there. And then if you put Harden, if you're trying to hide Harden, do you hide him on Hart, which is not ideal, or do you put him on Mikal Bridges or OG or something like that? And then now you're going to have to test Harden a little bit here. So it kind of feels like no matter what, Cleveland is going to have at least one defender kind of testing the boundaries of their abilities defensively. And I guess if you're Kenny Atkinson at that point, you're just like, all right, which one of our defenders do we kind of want to put in that situation?
I totally agree. And I think that this is maybe I'm cutting to the chase a little bit here, and we'll talk about it when we talk about the other side of the ball. But my guess is that as we get towards the weeds of this series, we're going to start seeing more one big lineups for the Cavs than we see the double big actions. And the reason for that is, I mean, we'll talk about this on the offensive end. I think they're going to need the shooting, but I also think it just helps them with the matchups. It prevents a lot of these kind of clunky situations where there's always a big having to deal with either Towns or having to deal with, how do I guard this? You mentioned it, Josh Hart kind of screening in the situation where a big is trying to stay at the paint. And it just becomes really difficult. We've seen the Knicks really exploit teams that use ghost coverage in this way. In particular, the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA Cup final, the Knicks really exploited their defense with setting really high screens with Josh Hart, getting Jalen Brunson getting downhill in a hurry, and he's already in your face by the time you have somebody stepping up, and he's hitting those 12-footers with basically just like unbelievable reliability. So it poses so many issues when you have these double bigs and don't really have a place to hide James Harden as well. I just think that the Knicks are going to be able to do what they want with this Cavs defense for the most part, and it just poses a much different challenge than the Pistons did, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree with you more. The more I broke this down, if Cleveland's going to win this series, if they're going to win games in this series, obviously, I think it's just going to be them kind of exploding offensively, but we can get there. In terms of the big man matchup, also, I mean, the other part that the Knicks have found out over the last series and a half is Karl Anthony Towns is a hub on offense. I mean, what he's doing as a passer has just completely transformed. It finally clicked. I mean, this is it. This is Knicks basketball nirvana. It felt like we were working and working and working and getting there. We finally found it, and we were at the promised land. I have been so impressed with Karl Anthony Towns. Not only credit to Mike Brown, credit to Jalen Brunson, credit to everybody who has helped facilitate Karl Anthony Towns in this way. Massive credit to Karl Anthony Towns for making the good decisions, for just completely embracing this role. They're going to put him up high on the floor. I think for me, if I'm the Knicks, I want Karl Anthony Towns as a passer first, a spacer second, and a post guy third. And he's going to do all of it because that's Karl Anthony Towns. But that's sort of the priority. That's the list of priorities right there. And then, you're obviously going to get into that two-man action with Brunson. And if you've got Cat and Brunson up high on the floor, not only are you pulling a big away from the basket, one of those Cleveland bigs away from the basket, you're also turning the action, all the eyes defensively to that Brunson-Cat stuff. I'm not breaking news here. This is the Knicks' whole thing. This is the whole formula. The pick and rolls, the DHOs, all that stuff. But then the other thing here, and I know I'm going to be preaching to the choir right now, are those flex actions that they've been running in these playoffs. And all that backdoor stuff has just been, nobody's had an answer for it. And I don't know that Cleveland will. I mean, if they can manage to drop Jarrett Allen back and have Mobley play high, and if Mobley can guard that first action, that's the answer for Cleveland. Mobley just is a master at guarding that first action in this series. Jarrett Allen is dropping. Josh Hart or OG Anunoby are not hitting those threes, or they are and they're not worried about it. And all of a sudden they're able to kind of erase those backdoor cuts. That's how I think you start to grind the gears of that Knicks half-court offense.
Yeah, I honestly think you just have to live with the Knicks shooting corner threes. Like you just have to pick your poison, say who's not shooting well, who's not in a rhythm, and you kind of live with that because you cannot allow those flex actions, those backdoor cuts, those you just forays to the basket, just a layup line. You just can't do it. And we saw Philly just kind of give up and say, I guess there's nothing we can do about it, which is kind of crazy to imagine, especially from a Nick Nurse coach defense. But at the same time, I don't know that there are any good solutions. And I love the hierarchy that you laid out for Karl Anthony Towns, because I think that would be my preference. I think that's his preference in terms of passer first, spacer second, post player third. I think that he would like that as well. Karl Anthony Towns loves to distribute the ball. He loves to be the playmaker. It was incredible, the closeout game against the Hawks, where we saw him dominate a game and take only 4 shots. He took 4 shot attempts, 1 3-pointer and 3 at the rim. He only made 1 of them. 1 field goal attempt made, and utterly dominated the game. 12 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists, 3 steals, 1 block. Was completely dominant all around. I thought his best game of the postseason by far. And the guy didn't take any shots. And you ask him about it after the game. He's like, oh, I only took 4 shots. I didn't even notice. And I kind of believe him because I think he just loves to pass the ball. He wants the ball in his hands and he wants to distribute. There's a B-ball index stat metric that I really love called passing creation quality. And what it does is it measures how good a shot in terms of expected field goal percentage, in terms of the shot that your teammate is taking off of your passes. Karl Anthony Towns for the last 5 seasons has been 96th percentile and above in that metric, and that includes all players, including point guards, everyone in the NBA. He has been top quality in passing. I think he knows he's an elite passer, and he's like, finally somebody's let me do it, and he's really enjoying it. So, and Knicks fans are too.
Really quick, I want to give so much credit also to OG and to Hart on those flex cuts, because an underrated part of that is how strong they are. Because that's starting in the corner off the ball, officials aren't looking in that direction to start these plays. And so anytime somebody tries to get up close to them, they're just like, get off of me. They just shove the guy off of them, create just a little bit, like a half a foot of space, and that just gives them enough room to either go back to or go over it and across or whatever they need to do. It's been an unstoppable action. You know it's going to be in the scouting report for the Cavs. But if I'm the Cavs, I'm like, yeah, that's maybe why we want Allen on playing off of OG, is because he can kind of stop that cut. Then obviously they could just not cut and then just splash it from the corner if that's what they want to do. But like, okay, if Josh Hart or if James Harden ends up in that situation, those guys are going to put Harden strong, but Harden doesn't want to work hard there. He can kind of get pushed off if that's what it's going to be. So a bunch of stuff there. The other thing that I think the Knicks are going to want to do offensively is attack James Harden and every time Sam Merrill's in the game. You're going to have to go after those guys. I think if Harden is on Hart, you're going to have Hart come up as a screener. They're going to try to force a switch on those actions. And with Merrill, I think you chase him and you try to punish him as much as you can also. I didn't put that number one because I don't think that the Knicks want to get so involved in just hunting that religiously every time down. They want to kind of get to their own stuff first. But obviously, if they're able to get those guys on good matchups, that's going to be a priority for them too.
Totally agree. I think the biggest lesson for the Knicks so far early in this postseason has been our first option should not be matchup hunting with Jalen Brunson. That is, you have the ultimate nuclear last ditch option, plan B, of almost any team in the NBA where let's run our stuff. Let's try to get these flex actions. Let's try to get guys cutting to the rim. Let's try to get Karl-Anthony Towns either downhill or making these great passes to cutters. And then, you know what? If nothing works, there's 8 seconds left on the clock. Let's go to Jalen Brunson and let him create something because he's going to get a high percentage shot regardless. That's an incredible plan B. And I think the Knicks have finally realized that should be their plan B. For a long time, they played as that's their plan A, and they'll figure out something else later. And that just has not worked nearly as well as being that's the fallback. And if the fallback is let's get Jalen Brunson on Sam Merrill and let him just cook him for a mid-range shot that he's going to shoot at 49%, it's an incredible plan B in my opinion. And I think that's how they'll play it.
So in terms of how Cleveland's going to try to answer this defensively, Evan Mobley is the key to everything. If he could just be Defensive Player of the Year, Evan Mobley, at that point of attack, at the initial two-man action between Brunson and Cat, that's going to affect, obviously, what the Knicks do. I guess that's when we get into the flex actions and you try to start passing over the top of the defense, Mobley included. What else do you think the Knicks can do in those situations? How do they counter out the Evan? Because they haven't played anybody defensively quite like Evan Mobley in these playoffs yet.
Evan Mobley is the X factor, but I feel like that's even underrating it. He's the only factor for the Cleveland Cavaliers right now. He has to play at a Defensive Player of the Year level to slow down this Knicks offense. And he showed definitely some signs in the Pistons series of kind of rounding back into that shape. I think that the Knicks will just I think the Cavs, no matter what, will have to give up something. I'm not saying that the Knicks will play kind of keep away from Evan Mobley, but I think he can't be everywhere at once. And that is just the nature of playing defense. The offense kind of chooses how much you're involved in the plays. And so I think that the Knicks will just the ball will naturally filter to where he's not. And if he's switching out on the perimeter, I think that's actually advantage Knicks because now the other four guys are the ones guarding in space and the Knicks want to move the ball, get ball reversals to the other side, and Mobley's not going to be over there. So I think we could see this interesting kind of dynamic where the Knicks are quote unquote targeting Evan Mobley, but really all that is to bring him on the ball, to bring him away from the off-ball actions, if that makes any sense. So I think we'll see some of that as a way to battle Mobley's dominance as a defender.
I could not agree more. Speaking of centers, I think another big X factor for the Knicks is going to be Mitchell Robinson, because when we talk about the possession battle in this series, the Cavs are going to try to win the possession battle in a lot of ways, but mostly with the three ball, right? They're going to try to get up 38, 40 threes a game. That's what they're going to try to do. The Knicks aren't going to take that many threes unless the Knicks ask them to, or unless the Cavs ask them to take that many threes, and then I guess the Knicks will, but they prefer not to. But the Knicks are going to win this series with rebounds. They're a better rebounding team than Cleveland is, and Mitchell Robinson is a big part of that. One of the things that that the Cavs coaches are going to tell Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen is going to say, it's going to be, hey, you cannot get crushed on the boards. I think what's going to be really interesting is early in this series, obviously Mitchell Robinson comes off the bench for the Knicks. If Allen and Mobley are doing a good job keeping it even on the boards, then Mike Brown's like, all right, send in Mitchell Robinson, send in the goons, right? Just send in the globe here. And you're just now you're not going to be winning the rebounding battle. Now we kind of tip the scale. So Mitchell Robinson kind of being this thing that Mike Brown can kind of just put his finger on the scale and tip things one way or the other is going to be interesting, I think.
Knicks fans are going to be furious that it took us this long to get to Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson,
17 whole minutes.
17 minutes before talking about Mitch. Big Mitch is the guy that is on every Knicks fan mind, and it really tracks back to 2023, the 2023 series, Knicks versus Cavs, where the Cavs ended up losing in 5 games to the Knicks, just simply by the Knicks overwhelming them on the boards, both offensive and defensive, to your point. And it was Mitch who grabbed around 23% of available offensive rebounds when he was on the court.
Insane.
And just utterly dominated them in every single way, like physically just overwhelmed them. And now we're talking about a Mitch who is looking healthy, coming off of one of his best defensive seasons, and by far his best offensive and overall rebounding season of his career. Just statistically, this is the best he has ever looked on the boards. I do think the Cavs aren't that same team, and this is my pushback to Knicks fans who are really saying like, oh, Big Mitch is just going to come in and just dominate these guys just like he did in 2023. I think that this team, in terms of the Cavs, learned a lot from that series. I think they got stronger. I think they're a little older. And I think they recognize the level of intensity that is necessary to kind of fight on the boards. And they definitely showed it against the Pistons, who are one of the most physical teams in the league. So I don't think it's going to be as easy, but it's going to be a huge factor. And Mitchell Robinson is the guy that I think that Kenny Atkinson and everybody in Cleveland might be losing sleep over.
Is there somebody else on the Knicks, either a starter and come off the bench, that you think can be X factor, like something less than an X factor, like a Y factor almost?
I'm going to say Deuce McBride's going to be my Y factor.
Yeah.
And I say that because in the event that the Cavs are kind of funneling the ball to Josh Hart or even OG Anunoby, those guys are either reluctant or not making threes. And the Cavs, as the underdog in the series, do want to up the variance. They would like there to just be this factor where it's like, if you're making shots, then you're going to win. But if you're not making shots, then we have a great opportunity here. And so I can imagine a situation where Hart or OG is not hitting shots, and you go with Deuce McBride, who is the Knicks' best shooter, best spacer, best long-range shooter, best contested three-point shooter, most aggressive three-point shooter, and that just bends things in their favor too aggressively for the Cavs to really keep up with. So it depends on how Mike Brown wants to play it. I think his first plan B option is going to be going with Mitch and doing a double big with Towns and Mitchell Robinson. But I think his plan C option will be going to the Y factor and Deuce McBride, and he'll just be spacing the court out.
Yeah, without giving away too much early, it's why I'm leaning Knicks, I think, right now, is because, okay, we talked about what Cleveland is going to try to do defensively. If they succeed in those things, Mike Brown can just say, okay, cool, congrats, you succeeded in this thing. Here's a Y factor, to X factor to throw into the mix. Now you can't do this thing. If you've figured out how to guard us, we could put McBride in there, and now we're spacing you out in a way that makes you uncomfortable. If you are able to keep it even on the boards, now we can go to Mitchell Robinson and things like that. I think one other X factor on this end of the court is going to be, for Cleveland, Dean Wade. So I think they're going to end up starting Max Strus, is going to be my guess. But I do think Dean Wade is going to have to play, and he's going to have to play a lot in this series. Maybe he does eventually start in the series. Who knows? Depends on how it goes. But I just think his size, plus his ability to shoot the ball, I think his size specifically is going to be good for switching the Cat Brunson actions, if that's what they're going to end up doing there, because I think Strus starts, and I think he starts on Brunson, because we saw him guarding Cade in the last series. I think they like that look. They want Strus's three-point shooting. They're going to look at that as something that is a non-negotiable. We have to win the three-point line, and Max Strus gives us the best chance at doing that. But if things go haywire, I could see them maybe sliding Dean Wade in there. But either way, he's coming off the bench. He'll play a bunch of minutes. And like I said, I think that size, if they put him on Brunson, that'll be something that they could use to switch those actions. But I don't think it'll be the first option, but it could be a swing factor here.
It could be a swing factor for sure. I think the problem with Dean Wade is his three-point volume, right? To your point, like I think you're going to want Max Strus. In my opinion, Max Strus is going to play a ton of minutes in this series because they absolutely need his shooting to stay attached to the Knicks offense and to keep them honest on the other end, as we'll talk about soon. But I do think that Dean Wade will matter because of his switchability, his ability to guard both Brunson and Towns, and there's probably, besides Mobley, nobody else on the Cavs who can reliably do both. But that being said, I just would be concerned about his shooting on the other end and being in their offense getting so stagnant with him on the court that I don't imagine he's going to play as much of a role as a Max Strus in this series.
And then Sam Merrill's obviously in that mix too. And the other thing with Dean Wade is they're going to just make him run through those screens over and over and over again. And that's when you start testing him laterally. And that's when things kind of when he gets in trouble a little bit. All right. Anything else on this end before we move to the Cavs on offense?
Nah, I'm excited to talk about the Cavs. Let's talk about their offense.
Let's start with the matchups. I think, and tell me if you disagree, because I think the Knicks can kind of approach us in a variety of ways. I think they go Bridges on Mitchell. I think they go Josh Hart on Harden, Cat on Jarrett Allen, OG on Mobley, and then they put Brunson on Strus, and they just let those guys go head to head on both ends of the court. Do you agree, disagree? I could be swayed.
I think that's probably right. I think that the Knicks are going to be super non-committal to who guards Harden and who guards Mitchell. And I think that it really depends. We see different versions of Mikal Bridges defensively, and that is one of the banes of Knicks fans' existence. Oftentimes, his struggles come when he's on the ball and having to navigate screens constantly. He can just really die on those screens. Doesn't always use his length to rear or side contest as well as, a guy like a Derek White or something like that, who you would think that Mikal Bridges can do it well with his freakishly long arms, but he doesn't. And so I think it depends if the Cavs just want to run Mikal Bridges through a series of screens. I think that they would not feel comfortable with him guarding Donovan Mitchell or James Harden. But I think with James Harden, he's not going to punish you as, attacking downhill off of those screens as much as as Donovan Mitchell will. And so I can imagine them starting Bridges on Harden for that reason. Although he is like a pick and roll master, it's not with the same kind of fervor as we see an aggression that we see from Donovan Mitchell off of those screens. So that's kind of one of the reasons that might sway me. But Josh Hart has been playing incredible defense this postseason. He has been incredibly physical. He's getting over screens, the best I've seen him do in my time watching him as a Knick. And I think that they're going to be most excited about seeing him deal with the point of attack more so than anybody else. And to your point, I love that you said OG, like kind of on one of the, you said on Mobley, right?
Yep.
I think OG will definitely be on Mobley. I think they want OG more of in that help position, roamer position, all of those kinds of things, being closer to the rim. I think that's for sure. So I think it's Josh Hart, the guy that's going to toggle around the most of the starters to kind of shut down whoever's getting off on the other end, more so than Mikal Bridges, who we think of as the better defender.
I think you're right. The only reason I went Hart on Harden is because if Harden's going to guard Hart on the other side, the Knicks might just say, you know what, you want this, we'll just give it to you. We'll do this on both ends. We'll have Bridges. But to your point, I do think they're going to be non-committal, and I think that's the right way to do this, is because first of all, you got to show Donovan Mitchell different looks. It'll be Bridges, it'll be Hart, it'll be OG, it'll be a bunch of guys.
For sure.
So obviously, you'll get the switch, and maybe it'll be somebody else at different times. The one thing and that's, I think, the number one thing for the Knicks is you just can't let Donovan Mitchell get going. And it's going to be the number one for the Cavs is we got to get Donovan Mitchell going because that's when we're at our best, especially as a playmaker in those pick and roll situations. But I think that they'll play it pretty straight in terms of guarding Mitchell unless he starts getting hot. If he makes two open jumpers in the beginning off of, coming off a screen or something, I think you'll see maybe the Knicks start blitzing them and helping, but they're going to show them a lot of different looks, I think, in this one throughout the series. And then the other thing I think if you're the Knicks that you need to do is you got to just hit Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen early on those rolls. Tag them, hit them, just get physical. It'll be an X's and O's scheme thing. Sometimes it'll just be a chutzpah thing, and you're just trying to kick the crap out of this guy. Whichever way you got to do it for the Knicks, you got to probably do it all ways for the Knicks.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I think that actually, to your blitzing point, I think the Knicks have gotten really, really skilled at blitzing and rotating off of those blitzes really well. That's something they've done this postseason that they haven't done as much this entire season. And it's been so effective. Of course, they played multiple teams who feel like bad to non-shooters. So, they've leveraged Dyson Daniels in the first round. They were leveraging Kelly Oubre. We've seen games where Oubre's the lead scorer, and that's by design. Like, they're like, we want Kelly Oubre to be the lead scorer on the Sixers. If Oubre is scoring the most, more than Maxey and Embiid, we're pretty happy with that situation. And so the Knicks do a lot of kind of blitzing towards the sidelines, getting the ball out of the point guard's hands, having someone tag the roller, and then having that roller swing the ball to the corner. And oops, who's in the corner? Dean Wade. All right, well, if you're going to beat us with 3-point shooting from the corner, Dean Wade, who rarely ever takes more than 5 threes in a game, then I guess you got us, but we're going to leverage that and use that to buy time to get back to the matchups that we want. So I think it won't just always be a steady diet. To your point, they'll mix it up, but it will be situations where if the Cavs look to try to target Brunson and matchup hunt with Brunson, the Knicks will be totally comfortable just putting 2 on the ball temporarily and using that shoot or non-shooter or unreliable shooter as time to leverage to get back to the matchups that they want. And so they'll temporarily put 2 on the ball, and they've gotten really, really good at it. Not something they had done early in the season.
It'll be interesting also to just see like a little thing is like how much help are the Knicks going to show on these pick and rolls? Like, are they going to be helping up from the corners with the low man? Are they going to be helping at the nail earlier in the possessions and things like that? How late in the shot clock are they going to start running at these guys? I think those are going to be some interesting just sort of like cadence and dance things as the series goes along. If I'm Cleveland, number one thing I want to do when I'm on offense, I think, and I debated, is it attacking Brunson or is it attacking Cat? And it's kind of sometimes the same thing, and I understand that. But like, if I'm going to prioritize one of them, I think I'm going to try to put Brunson. I'm going to put a target on him. He's going to be on a three-point shooter, right? Brunson, more likely than not. So we're going to put those three-point shooters, whether it's Strus, Merrill, whoever, we're going to put them into the actions, and we're going to make them run through screens. We're going to get into our double drag actions early in offense, as we know that's our patented thing that we do as the Cavs, and we're just going to make Brunson work. And if we can just tire him out defensively, that kind of feels like we start to handicap us a little bit in a good way. That's where I kind of landed on this. What about you?
I think that's probably right. I can imagine it going that way for sure. I can imagine like the Cavs getting baited into a little bit of an isolation off with James Harden. Like, let's keep getting Brunson on switches, and that could work, but I don't know if you want to live with that. I'm not entirely sure. One of the things that the Knicks have done really well is they sort of bait these teams into targeting Brunson and attacking him, and kind of getting into the mid-range and kind of living off of the diet. We've seen them do that against the Celtics with Tatum or Brown, and it's like, okay, let's keep getting Brunson on Brown, and then let's keep taking these 17-footers, and it's like the Knicks are like, great, sign me up, you can do that all game. But with the Cavs, we will see Harden and Mitchell both, as they target Brunson, look to get into more of the step back three kind of situation. And that is where you can start to hurt the Knicks. In my opinion, the Knicks' recourse to that is going to be just blitzing the ball handler, because like I said, the Knicks are gotten really comfortable with having 3 guys defend 2 and then rotating out to minimize that advantage that they're allowing temporarily. And so I think that they've become proficient in that way. And I don't think they're going to allow, them to just target Brunson all game. I agree with you that if between the two, you should probably be attacking Brunson more so than Towns. Towns is like a kind of surprisingly good switchability, especially on the wing, and he can keep a guy in front of him for a particular amount of time. Also has some recovery block ability too, which is surprising, and his defense has been sharp this postseason. The best defense I've seen from him probably in his entire career. So I definitely think the way to go, if you're going to go in that direction, and they definitely will, is more Brunson, but I think the Knicks have ways to kind of get out of that a little bit more.
I agree. I'm also... The Harden is who I'm specifically looking at here too, because his whole thing is mismatch hunting. It's his whole thing. He's going to try to get Brunson, and if Harden does get Brunson on his backside, you're going to see the Cavs clear out and let him just go to work. And and to your point, yeah. I think the Knicks are willing to live with that for a certain amount of possessions. What they don't want, to your point, are the endless step back threes where Brunson's getting crushed on a screen, and now you're getting, okay, Brunson's getting crushed on a screen. That's our best player getting crushed in the middle of a series, and it's also letting their best player open for their sweet spot 3-pointers. You don't want that, but to your point, I think the Knicks have some counters there with their other defenders who are very good at blitzing and helping and showing there. Donovan Mitchell is, when he's at his best, he's doing less of the mismatch hunting, and I'm kind of interested to see what version of Donovan Mitchell we get. I tend to think we're going to get the good Donovan Mitchell because of that great Game 7 that he just played, but who knows? I mean, it's a long series. It can kind of flip. We can get all versions of Donovan Mitchell in this series, but I think the Knicks would prefer that he kind of gets into mismatch hunting. But when Donovan Mitchell, when he's on, it doesn't matter who's in front of him. He can score on anybody. He'll get to his spots, and when he's worried about that, that's when when he's not as worried about the matchup hunting. I think it's when he's at his best, and then when he's able to get the big to commit to him and step up, and then he can deliver it to Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley in the dunker. That's when the Cavs offense is really humming, and that's what we saw against the Pistons in that blowout in Game 7. I think they're going to be trying to get to that, but to get to that, I think you got to involve Brunson into the action. You get downhill, and then you're moving.
Totally agree with that. I think, honestly, I think Donovan Mitchell is one of the most underrated players in the game. I just don't think he gets the respect that he deserves for all that he does to just bend defenses. And when he's going, to your point, when he just has it going, he's not guardable. And there's nothing really you can do besides bringing to the ball. And I am very opposed to bringing to the ball in general. I don't like just allowing there to be an easy outlet for offense. I think you kind of create offense for your opponent when you bring to the ball. It's just telling them, you put up a sign that says, go this direction, like send it this way. And I feel like you're kind of doing their job for them. But that being said, when Mitchell is going, you kind of just have to. You can't get stops that way. One of the issues that I have with the Cavs, which is why I'm not as high on them this season as I was last season, this team now is, I believe, the number one team in isolation percentage in the playoffs right now, and that's definitely a James Harden effect. Last season, this was player movement, ball movement. Everything is catch, and you make your decision within a half a second, whether you're attacking, you're passing, you're shooting, whatever you're doing. The interior passing was incredible, from a playmaker to a big to big interior passing. The cutting was always sharp. They were just like a well-tuned machine, and it worked really well for Donovan Mitchell because when you give him the ball and he already has a split second of an advantage, he's going to cash in on that advantage one way or another. Either he's going to force you to help and dump it off, or he's going to get all the way to the basket or hit an open shot. This Cavs team's a little slower. They're a little more methodical. They're a little more like isolation heavy. They're a little more matchup hunting. And I don't think that bodes as well for Donovan Mitchell in particular. And to your point, they need him to be the best player in the series, in my opinion, for them to win it. And it's not as perfectly fine-tuned for him to be able to be the best player in the series. So that's a little bit of my concern for the Cavs on the offensive side.
It's a great call. And I think, you saw last year when that Cleveland offense was humming, they were driving to the basket and they were creating those looks off those drives. And it was primarily Mitchell and Garland doing that for Cleveland. This year, like you said, you swap Garland out and you bring in Harden. And they do a little bit more isolation. They're a lot more methodical. They're getting deeper into the shot clock. The way that they've been able to unlock some of last year's magic is with Evan Mobley doing a lot of the initiating, right?
Yeah,
when he's in the middle of the floor, and now the offense starts to hum a little bit. That's going to be a problem if OG Anunoby is on Mobley, because now he's just a guy that can just he's a stick in the middle of the gears of the watches, right? Like he's going to grind it down to a halt, and that's why I kind of like OG on Mobley there. If I'm Cleveland, I'm also trying to get Cat in space. That's the other one here. If it's not Brunson, then we're attacking Cat. We know that those guys will be staggered a little bit. Easy, simple thing, like just bring his guy into the action, and we're gonna bring that guy in as a screener. And one thing I think that we'll see a lot of from Cleveland is just empty side pick and roll with Cat in the action, try to make him guard in space. But to your point, he's been really good at that. And if we get this version of Cat defensively in this series, now it's a different animal, right? Like, James Harden and Donovan Mitchell are very different kind of, but he did a decent job against Maxey, did a decent job against McCollum later in that Hawks series. I think you did it. The point you made about his recovery defense in these playoffs been just a different player. I'm like, wait, Carlton Towns never made straight lines on defense, like from where he was to the ball. Now he's doing that. So we'll see how he holds up. The other thing I think for Cleveland is they need to figure out a way to leverage their spacing. And I think that's why I agree with you. What you said earlier, we're going to get a lot of one big lineups in this series. I think Cleveland is going to realize the only chance we have is with multiple shooters on the court. That's the only chance we're going to have. We're not going to be the better team, but maybe we can be the better math team. And that, to me, is the only way Cleveland makes this or wins this series, I should say.
Yeah.
Which is possible. Is possible.
Totally possible. Yeah, for sure. But I 100% agree with you. I think they recognize they're the underdog, and they recognize they need some of that variance on their side. And how do you get variance on your side? You turn it into a 3-point shootout, and you say, maybe we'll be better than you across 7 games 4 times than you would be. And that's totally viable. I think that is their most viable path to winning. And so I do think they are prepared to go in this direction where it's one big and they spread it out. One of the other things I'm a little down on about the Cavs this season is that their shooting just hasn't been the same, right? And obviously Strus was out for a while, and that affected things. But you lose whatever kind of superhuman version of DeAndre Hunter as a shooter that you had last season, and now obviously you have Merrill, one of the best in the league. But besides Merrill and Strus, you don't have a ton of guys who can just reliably space for you. And then when you talk about Merrill in particular, you have a guy who's a potential liability on the other end, especially with Jalen Brunson on that side of the court. So how much is he going to play? You can't just play the guy 40 minutes per game. He's going to hurt you the other way. So I just feel like their spacing is going to be a problem, and they really need a huge Strus series. Like I really did. I agree, and I don't think you even said this, but I might have put the words in your mouth. I think Donovan Mitchell has to be the best player in the series for them to win it. But I also think Max Strus has to have an incredible performance for them to have the best chance to win, because he is their best spacer, who is also a good defender on the other end. And I think he's going to be a critical player for them.
He's going to have to hit like 22 plus 3-pointers in this series for the Cavs to win the series. Anything else on this end before we make our predictions? Well, maybe you want to make your predictions for your show, but I'll give you my prediction. I don't know if you want to make a prediction here.
Oh, I'm totally happy to get to make a prediction. It's not going to be any secret, trust me.
Let's. I'm gonna go Knicks in 6. And the reason I say 6 is I think we get one Donovan Mitchell game, and I think we get one game where the Cavs shoot like 1,000,000% from 3 and they get the win. And I'm actually going to tell you exactly which games go which way. I think the Knicks win game 1. I think Donovan Mitchell shows out in his hometown in game 2, and it's 1-1 going back to Cleveland. I think the Knicks take game 3 in Cleveland. I think the Cavs take game 4 in Cleveland. That's the one where they go crazy from 3-point range. And then the Knicks win the next 2, and they close it out on the road in Cleveland. That's my guess. That's my prediction.
Hyper specific. I love it. So I'm gonna say Knicks in 6 as well, which is kind of funny. We both have the Knicks closing out on the road. This is the thing for the Knicks. I think game 1 is so critical. I think game 1 is going to be tough because the Knicks have so much pressure on their end. Like, they've been sitting on the couch, just chilling, watching these other teams go play 14 games. I think the Cavs are in this crazy situation where not only have they played the most possible games, they played 2 overtime games, they played 2 hyper physical teams, the number 1 most fouling team in the league and the number 6 most fouling team in the league. And they got to be worn out, and they're coming in on the road. So you would think all the advantages in the Knicks' favor, but the Knicks know that all the advantages is in their favor. They have to win game 1. And so that's a ton of pressure. This is their best chance to get to the NBA Finals in a really long time. And I think that they could potentially wear that come out early in the game. And if the Cavs are still in a rhythm coming off of this game 7, and the Knicks are still trying to figure out their rhythm coming off of being on the couch and resting up, that could be a tough thing to come back from mentally and just being in the game. So I think game 1 is critically important. I think if the Knicks win game 1, I honestly think it'll be a 5-game series. But I actually have the Knicks losing in game 1, which Knicks fans won't like that.
Look, I think this really comes down to Karl-Anthony Towns, and I just wrote this for RealGM.com about like just Towns redefining who he is as a player right now. The ultimate thing that could backfire on them is that Cat just reverts back to bad version of Cat, like the frustrating version of Cat. He's been such the opposite in this playoff so far, and I really do want to believe, and I do believe that this is the version of Cat that we're going to get in this series. But if Harden is able to get him in isolation, get him into foul trouble over and over and over again, and Cat's minutes are limited in this series, that's another thing that the Cavs are going to try to do in this series. So I still feel good about the Knicks. I just feel like they have too many counters. They have too many answers, too many ways to win where they don't have to just rely on the variance night to night. And I just don't think that that's a winning formula. And unfortunately for the Cavs, I think that's their formula. So we both have Knicks in 6. We'll see how it goes. Game 1, Tuesday night. XJ, you do a terrific job. You'll be covering for post-game shows over at Locked On Knicks. Check out his other podcast, The Hot Hand Theory. Thanks so much for jumping on, man. This was fun.
Appreciate you, Wes. It was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, let's close out the show with some NBA headlines. We're going to start with New Orleans Pelicans, who announced that they had officially hired Jamal Mosley. Mosley was fired by the Orlando Magic after 5 seasons. He comes in and takes the head coaching job in New Orleans. New Orleans moving on from Borrego. A lot of controversy about, Borrego did a pretty good job towards the end of there. Should he have just gotten the job? Didn't seem like he got a really strong look by New Orleans there. Did Borrego maybe deserve a bigger look? Yes. I like the Jamal Mosley hire for them, though. The one thing we know about Mosley, as bad as it was at the end for the Magic, he's a good coach, and he can install a defensive identity, and he can do it pretty quickly. New Orleans last year, 23rd in defense, 20th in offense. They need to pick one to be good at. It's probably not going to be great offensively for them for a while. They're building around Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears. Those guys are good players. I like both of them, specifically Derek Queen. We'll see what their upside is. Like, what is the ultimate ceiling of those guys? But they're obviously going to be needle-moving offensive players at the very least. As they get better, as they get more experience, they'll start to move the needle on that end. They obviously still have Zion Williamson, who is a huge needle mover, especially offensively when he's right. And by the way, really good season for Zion coming off of last year. As healthy as he's been in a long time. Mosley's going to come in, though, and he's going to install some sort of a defensive identity. He's going to make them play hard. He's going to bring a culture. He's going to create a higher floor for a team that, frankly, needs it. I think the ceiling is still very much tied to their young players, and maybe Zion. We'll see what the future is for Zion Williamson. With Jamal Mosley, do they go a little bit younger? Do they actually just try to surround Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears with defenders? They're clearly trying to build around these guys, right? They took Fears with their first pick last year. Obviously, remember, they traded up to go get Derek Queen last year also. So they're looking at these guys as cornerstone pieces. You need length and defense around them. I don't really know that Zion fits that. Do they try to move on from Zion? He'd be a quiet guy that I'm looking at this offseason as maybe a guy that could get on the move. Could be a gettable guy for the right team. Let's talk about the latest on Giannis. ESPN reporting earlier this week that rival front offices are now actively engaged with Milwaukee on Giannis trade talks. Shams reporting specifically the Heat and the Warriors have submitted offers to the Milwaukee Bucks, at least the frameworks of offers, it sounds like. Also being reported that the Bucks' asking price is going to be a young star in the making, so a blue-chip young player, as well as picks. And one of those two things, it feels like for most of these suitors, is a problem, right? Like the Warriors can give you the picks, they can't give you a good young player. They have no good young players. The Knicks could give you some interesting players, not young players, but some interesting players, but they don't really have the picks. The Cavs can give you an interesting young player in Evan Mobley, perhaps, but they really don't have the picks. Giannis's reported preference is to stay in the Eastern Conference. I also think that narrows some realistic bidders. I don't think he's thrilled about the idea of playing in California, specifically in Los Angeles. Would he be interested in joining Steph and Steve Kerr in Golden State? Yeah, I think that might be a different type of scenario. But again, I just don't know that they have the stuff to get it done. Now, it's one thing for the Bucks to say this is what we want. That's what they're saying now. This is before Giannis and his representation get involved potentially in the whole, hey, he's extension eligible. He will sign here. He won't sign there. So the Bucks can come out and say, these are all the things we want. They're not going to get everything that they want for Giannis. I'll tell you that right now. They're not going to get everything that they want for Giannis. These things don't work that way, especially when the star player has this leverage that Giannis has, where he's going to be able to pull some strings. He might not be able to be like, hey, send me here or nowhere, but also he might, right? We kind of saw Anthony Davis do this with the Lakers. Now, Lakers still had to give up some stuff, right? Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, a bunch of other guys. But, felt like the Pelicans could have gotten more. The Bucks are going to get stuff. They're just not going to get everything that they want. I'm looking at the Heat, the Knicks, and the Cavs as maybe the primary suitors. I don't think Boston is in on this the way that some people think that they're in on this. I just don't know that they want to move Jaylen Brown for Giannis. I think that they recognize that Giannis is a better player when he's healthy, but they really appreciate Jaylen Brown's durability, especially coming off of the Tatum stuff. Brown's youth, the fact that he grew up in the franchise. I just don't think that they view it as enough of an upgrade to do the dramatic shakeup. Now, if Jaylen Brown does go to the Boston Celtics and says, I want my own team, maybe then we get into those kinds of conversations. Does he necessarily want Milwaukee to be his team? I don't think so. Maybe he would get rerouted to a third team, and that gets a little bit tricky. But I don't think Boston is in on this unless their hand is forced, as weird as that might sound. Also hearing that Atlanta, not really a Giannis suitor. That was sort of a team that was buzzing around the trade deadline, maybe even right after the Bucks got eliminated. Everything that I've heard since then is Atlanta's not really interested in making that sort of all-in move. Now, if the price on Giannis comes down to a point where they're like, maybe we kind of have to do this, then maybe that's something else that they'd look at that point. But right now, I don't see Atlanta being in on it. Minnesota is obviously the other team to watch on Giannis. Now, if he wants to stay in the Eastern Conference, that's something else. But then again, does he look at Anthony Edwards and say, you know what? I like Milwaukee. Minnesota's not that far away. I'm used to living in this part of the country. I could play with Anthony Edwards. Maybe. But if we're talking about the Eastern Conference, then maybe that's not Minnesota. Unless also maybe there's some intel that Minnesota is moving to the Eastern Conference and then in a couple of years, and then maybe that's not as big of a deal. Other teams I'm watching Philly. They're going to hire a new GM. They're going to be building around Tyrese Maxey. I don't think that they would do Embiid for Giannis straight up, just because why would the Bucks do that? But could the Embiid contract be involved in some sort of Giannis deal? It's just something I'm watching. I don't really know how it would work, but depending on who the new GM in Philadelphia is, Bob Myers obviously overseeing that stuff right now with the 76ers. I'm just watching them. I have no intel. I'm just watching them. Orlando, another team I'm watching. Would they offer one of Paolo or Franz to Milwaukee as a young piece to start building around? That's interesting if I'm Milwaukee. I think you have to watch them. And then the other team I'm watching is Brooklyn. And I don't know that I would do this if I were the Brooklyn Nets. I kind of feel like they should play it slow a little bit, but it is the Brooklyn Nets, and we've seen them do this before. If they were to make a move for Giannis, it would be a draft pick move. It would be, a bunch of their young guys move. Do they have enough stuff to also go get a second guy? Would be my question if I'm Brooklyn. Because it's not enough for me to go get Giannis, because now I'm just a worse version of what the Bucks were last year. But if I can get Giannis and a second guy, now that's interesting. And they're going to have a ton of cap space, so they can potentially pull off a Giannis trade, sign a bunch of players with cap space. We'll see. We know who some of the free agents are. Some of the restricted free agents also could be interesting here. Just watching. Again, no intel, just watching them. Last two things here. Kawhi Leonard, he's being shopped to Eastern contenders, according to Jake Fisher over at the Steinline. The Clippers are actively trying to move Kawhi to an Eastern Conference contender. The Knicks, Cavaliers, and Celtics have all been mentioned as potential suitors. I think Kawhi's whole deal is also tied to Giannis. Maybe not as a Giannis backup plan per se, but if the Bucks are just asking for too much, I could see teams calling the Clippers and pivoting to Kawhi. Because I think the Clippers understand, with everything going around with Kawhi, with his injury history, with his personality, with all the aspiration stuff, obviously, they know that they're not going to get like this king's ransom for Kawhi. I think the Clippers understand that. I think they want to move him to the East so that they don't have to see him anymore. I think Kawhi wants to move to the East because he's going to see it as the path of least resistance, and everything about Kawhi is all about the path of least resistance. No shade, but a little bit. Yeah, so Kawhi trying to go East. It's also what we're hearing on Giannis, right? If Giannis wants to stay in the Eastern Conference, okay. That's why I kind of say that that Kawhi's whole situation is at least tied to Giannis' situation. I think the same teams that you're going to hear talking about Giannis are the same teams that you're going to hear talking about Kawhi. So I think whatever teams don't get Giannis could just pivot to Kawhi, and that one of those teams will end up with him. Really quick thought on the NBA draft now that we're done with the Combine. I know that we have a clear top four. It just sort of feels to me like Darren Peterson is putting put over here as a guy that we're all saying definitely a top four guy, has the talent to be the number one pick, but we're all sort of just agreeing that AJ DeBanza is the number one guy. And there's some people out there that be like, well, Cam Boozer really should be the number one guy. He's got the highest floor of all these guys. Are we sleeping on Darren Peterson a little bit? I know that the stuff at Kansas wasn't great, but this guy went one-on-one against AJ DeBanza in college and outplayed him every single time. The high school tape is amazing. And look, even if maybe he's not telling the full truth about the creatine thing and the cramps, but even if it's a little true, it does start to explain it. And if you believe that stuff is behind him, are we going to look back in a few years and be like, how did this guy not go number one? I'll put it to you this way. Assume that in 10 years, we look back on this draft and say, how did X player not go number one? Who is most likely to be X player in that sentence? It's Darren Peterson, isn't it? It could be somebody else. It could be Caleb Wilson. But for the most likely, that's Darren Peterson. So I'm going to do more of a deep dive into this draft as we get closer. But it's just, that's a thought that I had. I'm like, are we sleeping on Darren Peterson a little bit too much right now in terms of the top guys in this draft. That's it for today. Thanks so much for tuning into the Real GM Radio with Wes Goldberg. Come back tomorrow for the double dribble with Mo and Jared. They're going to be breaking down game 1 of Knicks-Cavs. I'm sure we'll also get their reaction to Spurs Thunder and their thoughts on what we could look forward to in game 2 of that Western Conference Finals series. As always, make sure to subscribe on your podcast app and on YouTube.